So, welcome everyone. We have a fantastic program today. My name is Ashley Kim Weiss, and I'm the national coordinator of Together for Choice. For those of you who may be attending our event for the first time, Together for Choice is a national advocacy organization with a mission to unite and advance the rights of individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So today's program is about how to run a successful capital campaign, and we're going to record this program, and the video will be posted on the media page of our website, www.togetherforchoice.org. So now you have a vision for IDD housing, and you have a fantastic team of talented people, and you're ready to build and even have some startup capital. But the reality for many of us involved in building IDD housing is that we have to raise money, and we have to turn to our families and friends, their friends, philanthropic foundations, government agencies, and other public sources of funding to make our vision into reality. Today's speakers, Mary Ogle, Chief Executive Officer of A New Leaf, and her Chief Development Officer, Miranda Figueroa, are here to share with us how they were able to successfully raise over $19.2 million in just 20 months for The Village at A New Leaf, which is a newly constructed residential campus community near Tulsa, Oklahoma. Mary was actually our speaker at our last Community Spotlight event on June 8th, in which she shared her journey in developing The Village. And that video is also posted on the media page of our website. So thank you so much for joining us today, Mary and Miranda.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah. So let's start with the pre-launch. Can you tell us about all the work that you put in before you officially launch your capital campaign? Such as how did you even come up with it? Was this before or after you acquired the land? And how did you determine the goal?
Yes, so we started, the first thing we did was we went to our founders and made sure that what we were going to do was okay with them. And these are people who founded our company 40 some years ago. And what this did is that also set it up so that we could ask them for a lead gift. So that was the first thing that we did. And so the next thing, and then I'm going to turn it over to Miranda, and she's going to say some of the specifics, the mechanics of it. But the other thing we did in the beginning was we met with about 5 to 7 other agencies in Tulsa who had either just completed a capital campaign or were just maybe completed it the year or two before. So we just met with these people, took them to lunch, and then asked them what worked well, what didn't, sort of just what you guys are doing here today. We did that. And we also had a man that he used to be a fundraiser at a university. And so we asked him for guidance and advice as well. So these are just some of the few things we did beforehand, before we kicked off the capital campaign. And I'm going to turn it over to Miranda, who's going to talk a little bit more about that.
Okay. Yeah, so this was by far the longest part of the process. It's kind of like that old adage, measure twice, cut once. So there was a lot of planning that went in before we officially launched. The first thing that we did was we assembled a task force to really fully identify what was needed and what was wanted and where those two components intersected. And the task force was comprised of a couple of board members, our senior leadership team of our organization, and also an architect who had volunteered his time during the process. Through this task force, we met for, I think, 2 years leading up to it. We thoroughly studied the settings rule and the state rule. We established some financial modeling with our team and also another board member who had expertise in venture capitalism. We knew this was going to be a really big component of what funders would ask because this had been our organization's first capital campaign as well, and it is significant growth. We studied what was going on in the community, other campaigns that were going on in our community. We have something called the Funders Roundtable, where a lot of the big donors get together and, just discuss who's supporting what project. So that helped us get a really good firm handle on just the landscaping of the fundraising arena at that time. We had heavy board engagement as the process unfolded. The architect helped us get preliminary architecture drawings and even like a digital flyover, kind of like an animated flyover that really painted the picture of what the village would look like. And we established a client cabinet. A lot of times we think we know what our clients want, but we wanted them to have a seat at the table to understand what barriers we may not have thought of or things that they wanted to include in their neighborhood. And then from an organizational standpoint, in addition to that financial modeling, we started establishing financial forecasts and org charts that helped us really identify the components that we needed to ramp up and get in place so that we were prepared for the growth once the village came online. And that included adding to our development team so that I could focus more of my time on the capital campaign, and our annual operating component didn't take a hit along the way. So once all of those places were in place, then we officially made the chair ask to launch the campaign.
And once we had that chair asked, I'll just say one thing. Once we asked the chairs, the founders to be the chairs, that's when then we secured the land. So we did the task force in 2016 over 1 year. And then in 2017, we secured the capital campaign cabinet chairs. We asked them for a lead gift of 2.7 million. And we went and purchased we found the land before at that time in 2017.
So this was all done as a pre-launch of the
That's
capital
correct.
campaign. Got it.
That's correct.
So, so how did you determine the capital campaign goal? I think in terms of development budget, program budget, and the timeline.
So the capital campaign goal, that was easy because in that task force that Miranda mentioned, we determined at that time, like what kind of buildings, how many housing buildings, what we needed to make the village happen. And so the architect was able to say to us, well, let's use, $100 a square foot. I'm making that up, but here's how much it's going to cost per building. And so we did each building. We figured out how much each building would cost, how much the land would cost. We had undeveloped land, so we were able to get an estimate of how much it would cost to develop the land. We also put in the budget 3% for our own costs to raise the money. It's like a 2 to 3% is what you're supposed to say how much the campaign is going to cost. So once we put all those figures together, that's what we came up with, the 19.2 million. And so once we had that amount, then what we did is we put together, okay, here's how much it's going to cost. It's going to take us 24 months to raise the money. And then we put together, a plan on how we were going to do that. But that's how we came up with how much it was going to cost. And really having an architect as a part of that task force was really important because they know how to do that. They knew how to tell us how much everything was going to cost. And then Miranda and I put in the cost of the campaign, that 3%, which is common for any campaign. The other thing we put in the campaign is a $1.3 million maintenance reserve. So that was also a part of that campaign budget. We didn't do operations and we didn't do endowment in that capital campaign cost.
Got it. And so but did you ever hire a fundraiser consultant?
No, so we didn't do two things. We did not do a feasibility study. And Miranda and I would both say we are very glad about this because a feasibility study is where people would come in and they would go and meet with your major donors, maybe with you or without you, and they would ask them if it was feasible for you to have that campaign. And we didn't do that. And I guess, I don't know, I didn't want to hear anyone tell me no, because I had enough people telling me no. I didn't need more people telling me no. So we didn't do a feasibility study. We also didn't hire a campaign consultant. I'm sure consultants would be a good thing to have if you didn't have capacity to know who the prospects were, or to know how to do wealth screening and good data mining. But Miranda and I felt that we knew the capital campaign would change the course of our company. And so once we got these major donations, we didn't want someone else raising that money on our behalf. We wanted those relationships with the donors. And so we just decided not to have a consultant. So it was really just Miranda and myself.
Okay. Tell us about your past fundraising successes and failures, and how you were able to apply them to approach to this campaign.
Yeah, so I'll take that one. My background prior to joining A New Leaf is in national nonprofits and then corporate. Before that, neither of us had led a capital campaign before. So we knew that we were treading on a kind of new territory for us. However, both of us had led big, multifaceted projects in the past. And so we had that be the compass of the plan that we developed. And the mechanics for any major undertaking are really the same. You establish a vision, you get buy-in from those around you, both funders and non-funders, or stakeholders and non-stakeholders, and then aim high, aim big. If that's what you believe in, then the homework is done, that passion will translate. And so it's research and plan, research and plan, research and plan some more. So the passion plus the due diligence is what builds the ironclad case. And then go, but stay focused. That's, if there's nothing else that you take away from today, just aim big and stay focused. And don't deviate from that plan. You've got to trust the process once we build it. And Mary will show you a little bit more about that in just a moment. But be prepared for some education and some practices along the way. I think that might be one of the things that we learned is because we had grown so fast, a lot of our funders, even though we were reporting to them during their annual giving, they didn't realize how big we had grown. And so there was a little bit of a learning curve to not only talk about how we were prepared to take on a capital campaign, but also a lot of our funders weren't fully aware of the barriers that people with developmental disabilities faced. And so there was a little bit of education that came along the way with that. As far as the failures, you know, this is going to sound super egotistical, but Mary and I didn't even factor in a plan B. We were committed to plan A and persevering through whatever we needed to do to achieve the goal. We were prepared for no's, but that was ingrained within the plan. And, you know, there's a prospect component that goes to that. So we built in the failures to it as part of achieving the goal. It just happened. If you're not getting no's, you're probably not asking enough.
So how are you able to identify your donor prospects?
We started with the group that has been our tried and true for a very long time. We had built wonderful relationships with donors along the way. And then we leveraged relationships that were held within our client or our capital campaign cabinet. So that brought in some new donors for us. And then, you know, there's a ripple effect to that. So who do you know? Who does that person know? Who does that person know? The more people that know about your project, the easier it is to tell your story, because others begin telling your story as well. And then the other piece that it was really important for us to message to our donors is that we weren't solely relying on the philanthropic community. We secured some government funding as well. So there were some forgivable loans, there were some government grants that were available to us. And then the biggest component were low-income housing tax credits. And the message that we wanted to send is that we weren't relying solely on the philanthropic community. We were diversifying the funding to be able to support this project. And that was very important to us, that we messaged that we didn't take that funding that we were getting from the philanthropic community for granted.
I'm going to jump in here. Hopefully, can people hear me okay? Kim or Ashley, can you hear me okay? Because I can run over to Miranda's office.
Yeah, I increased the volume so I can actually
Okay.
hear you okay, but I think
Okay.
others are still having some problems. So I wasn't sure.
Because I can run over to Miranda's office.
Yeah. Oh, she can, Erin can
Okay.
hear. Okay,
Well,
let's move
okay.
forward, because I did
Okay.
increase turn up the volume and it worked.
Okay.
So I
Well,
think
the other thing I wanted to say about donor prospects is we looked at everybody's annual report in our community. So remember I told you about how we visited with people who had just completed a capital campaign. So we scoured annual reports from all of those nonprofits in town that recently had a capital campaign, and all the donors listed there, we just took all those names and put it on our prospect list. So even if we didn't have a relationship with them, if they gave to someone else's capital campaign, we put them on our prospect list.
Yeah, I had one more thing to add to that too. So Mary actually mentioned to me, I think on my second day on the job, that we'd be having a capital campaign. That minor detail was conveniently withheld. So, once we explored, kind of did our own internal feasibility study, I said, okay, I'm on board. I get it. I believe in this. Let's go forward. But my only request was that we didn't sell bricks. And so what that meant was we get in, we get out really fast. We set a threshold for the amount of giving level that we intentionally go after, knowing that there will be some smaller gifts that came along the way. So we did not have any plan in our gift chart to request gifts less than 100,000. That was one thing that was really important to me, is to not get in the weeds, because it's just as easy to ask for $1 million gift as it is a $5,000 gift. So we worked smarter and not harder.
wow. And did you have a specific campaign message or statement that you shared with your donor prospects?
Yes. So we put together a case statement. We didn't spend a lot of time on this. I mean, we did do it. It was 9 pages, and it really just identified the problem, the solution, the budget, how much it was going to cost, and who we were going to get this money from. It also included sustainability of the project. So in those 9 pages, again, it had the problem, the solution, the budget, and then how we were going to secure the funds, like who we were going to ask, and the sustainability of the project. And that really covered everything. We did not create any other marketing materials. We used our iPad, and we had that, like Miranda said, we had that drone footage from the architect that sort of showed what it would look like. And we would just take our iPad and we would show people that video, and then we'd hand them the case statement on our way out the door after we made the ask. We did not spend any money really on marketing materials. And we learned that from one of the people we had met with prior to doing it. And it worked great. We didn't need anything. And in doing the case statement, I always tell people, don't let it hang you up. Don't take a long time. Keep it simple, because it's never going to be perfect. And once you get out there and start asking people, they're going to say things, and then you can tweak what you need to tweak.
Absolutely. So tell us please walk us through all the steps after you launch the campaign.
Okay, I am going to share my screen if that's okay. Okay, so, and Ashley will send this out to you, but I wanted to give you this. This was our whole plan. This is the most important thing for the whole project is this plan. It's literally an Excel spreadsheet. On the first page is our dashboard. And so that always told us in this first line, like how many people we had confirmed written, signed agreement. And you see here, this is the verbal, only one donation did not have a signed pledge, which is really important. And I think it was really good for us. And then down here, we just had, this is just our dashboard, but this told us how much 80% of the goal was, 75%. So our board said we could break ground when we had 80%. And some other, it was important for other donors to know when we hit some of these milestones. So down here is what I wanted to show you. In order to get this gift chart table is what you need, and I'm going to show you. You should have one gift should be 20% of your goal. 4 to 6 gifts should make up 50% of your goal. And then 15 gifts should make up 75% of your goal. So for us, we had our lead gift was 14% of the goal. 6 gifts equaled 45% of the goal, and 15 gifts equaled 76% of the goal. So you see, we were pretty much in line with this up here where my marker is. That's what, I don't know, smart people tell you that's where the capital campaign should be. And this is where we actually were. So that was very good for us. And then this is just examples. So the way this works is for every one gift you need, you should have 3 prospects. So we needed, these are green is we got the gift, red is we didn't. But you can see these tabs below. So for instance, $500,000, $500,000 gifts. I needed 4 gifts at 500,000. So that means I needed 12 prospects. Does that make sense? And so we just kept this spreadsheet. We had the prospect, we had who the account manager was, what the next step was, or if they gave us the money, we put the gift in here. And then over here, we had like status, like, you know, what was happening with it. And so every month when we met with our capital campaign cabinet, we were able to review this. And so we did this for each level of gift. For like these, we needed 10 gifts at $250,000 a gift. So we needed 30 prospects. And so these all were filled in. Now, what I want to tell you too is when we started, we filled in the first tab first because you should focus on the biggest gifts first, not anything less than that. So we filled in, we needed, you know, so many $1 million gifts. So for every gift we needed $1 million, or we needed 3 prospects. So we filled in all those prospects' names. And then we went to the next tab of 500,000. We needed 4 gifts, so we needed 12 prospects. We put in people's names there. We did not fill in the prospect list for anything below 100,000, even for months after we were in the campaign. We did, again, all our ducks didn't have to be in a straight row. They just need to be in the lake. You know what I mean? Like it didn't all have to be perfect. But this spreadsheet is perfect. And it's really what kept us focused. And like Miranda said, you should not be raising money on any other tab except for the $1 million or $750,000 gifts or above. Get those gifts first, then move to the next tab. You might go after someone for $1 million and they'll only give you $250,000. That's fine. You can add them to the $250,000 tab. But don't be messing around with the smaller gifts. Get your first gifts first. And we got 11 $1 million gifts. So I think because we did that focus, it really helped. So I'm going to stop sharing, and then Ashley will send that.
Yeah, Tiffany, who's moderating the present program today, she did send out the file in the chat box. So please download it here, but we will also post it on our website along with the recorded video of today's presentation. How are you able to actually get a meeting? You just called them up and said, "I would like to meet with you to ask for $1 million from you."
Yes. What we mostly did is first we try to have relationships with people, but there was quite a few people we didn't have relationships with. And we would just call them up and tell them that we have a project. Usually what we did is our first step would be to call someone up and ask for their guidance. We have this project coming up. We'd really like to know if you were us, how would you approach it, or ask their guidance about things. And pretty soon then they're involved with you. And so then they will then give a gift. So we always ask for people's guidance first. And if we couldn't get a meeting, then we asked one of our board members or another philanthropist in town to get the meeting for us. And so that's how, but we didn't have any trouble getting meetings.
Great. So a New Leaf is an established organization that's been around for many years and has a very strong track record. So typically foundations and government agencies look for these type of qualities, and some of them actually require organizations like yours. And but we have many non-traditional family housing groups that are having a lot of challenges to obtain traditional financing options from traditional financial institutions that don't even know how to underwrite deals like this. So what advice do you have for newly emerging housing groups that are up against these challenges?
So this really goes back to research and plan, wash, rinse, repeat. It really is just over and over. And between those two, you will establish an ironclad case for support. If you can show why it is important, how you will raise the money, how you will make it sustainable, then you're golden, honestly. One thing I will say is become a great storyteller and take either a board member or a volunteer or a client, even better, with you every single time you go. The other thing to consider in your research is talk to other agencies across the country that are doing what you want to do and learn for them. In our research, almost everyone was so open with us. There's no competition. We're all on the same team trying to do the same thing. There's just not enough of us. So do those things, and then surround yourself with others that have expertise that might be a blind spot for you. And the more people that believe in you and support you, including your city, the better off you're going to be. And then the other thing I would say is practice fundraising now. Build those relationships with funders right now and prepare them if you're planning on doing a capital campaign at any point in the future. Just plant that seed, and then take them along on the journey with you.
Mary, do you have any other advice to add?
Well, just a few things of advice. Don't listen to anyone. Don't listen to anyone. I don't like to listen to anyone anyways about anything. But if Miranda and I would have listened to anyone, everyone would have told us there's no way you can raise this money. Even though we've been a long established nonprofit, we're not known at all in the bigger Tulsa community. We were 10 years ago, we were only $1 million operating budget. Today we're 12 million, but a lot of people didn't know us. And a lot of people, when we first started talking to funders, they were like, who are you? Like, what do you think you can raise $20 million? And so just don't listen to anyone, because so many people said no, like you can't do this. So we just didn't listen to anyone. So I would tell you, don't listen to anyone. The other piece of advice I would say is, you know, go with your gut, tell the story, don't worry about it all being perfect. Let it roll off. You're passionate about what you're doing, so just go raise the money. The other thing is, remember, those prospects, companies do not give money. So I know everyone wants to raise a lot of money. They think, oh, I have a big company in my town. That's who I'll raise the money from. It's not true. Companies only give 7% of all charitable giving in the whole country. So they should make up 7% of your campaign goal. The groups that's going to give you money are individuals and foundations. Foundations have to give away 5% of their assets every year. And so those are the two groups that are going to give you money. So those would be, I guess, the two biggest pieces of advice I would have. And also, once you raise this capital campaign money, your whole fundraising forever will change. Miranda and I now people are giving us $200,000, $300,000 just individual gifts, with before the campaign they would give us $20,000. So, all right, I'll be quiet now.
No, this is so great. Thank you so much. And we have plenty of time, not enough time, but we have enough time for some questions and answers. So for those of you that would like to ask a question, if you could raise your hand or type in your questions in the chat box, I'd be happy to read it off of the chat box. With that being said, I'll throw out one more question while we're receiving. I just want to make sure that I'm not seeing anybody with questions. So did you ever have a fundraising event? Host a fundraising event? Okay.
We did not have a fundraising event. Perry and I are both thankfully of the same mindset that events are, while they have their place, they're kind of a beast. So we were prepared if we needed to at the end, if we needed to rally the troops, but we never got to that point. We had great momentum from the start. And because of that momentum, we did not ever have to like deploy, if you will, a fundraising event.
Yeah. Somebody just asked a question about how long did it take. I believe it took 20 months. So that
Correct.
was, yeah.
So we secured the lead gift in 2017, and then in 2018 is when we launched the campaign, and it took us 20 months then to raise the money. And then we did not use any donor advice funds. We didn't secure those. From the low-income housing tax credits, we secured $3.2 million in low-income housing tax credits. That's a whole other discussion. If anyone wants more information on how we did that, feel free to email me or Miranda directly, and we'll walk you through that process.
And that's a 4% tax credit. So that's a 30% of total development income. Whereas if you go after the 9%, that's usually a lot higher, but it's a very competitive process. So we can have a whole different session on LIHTC. And, please reach out to Mary separately. What is your sustaining income for the facility? I wouldn't call this facility. It's a community, it's a village. So I think they're asking you about the village. How are you going to have a sustaining operation for the village?
Well, Miranda, go ahead, Miranda.
Yeah, so all of these components are really an expansion of what we were already doing. We already provided residential services. We already provided vocational services, which this new neighborhood gives us the ability to increase our capacity there. So this is the housing component, is the piece that is actually new. So two things there. One is that because it is low income housing, the individuals living there still pay rent. Their rent is just, capped because it's low income housing, it's affordable housing. The other piece is we continue to grow our philanthropic support by leaps and bounds every single year, 15 to 20% every year, because we just keep growing people that are aware of us and want to be a part of us. So it has been a natural progression, and we accounted for that in our financial modeling, in our forecasting, and now the financial modeling was merged into our forecasting. So it is us. It's not a separate component. The village is part of a New Leaf.
Yeah, so a couple of questions came about asking the ratio of government funding versus private donations. And you said that tax credit was how much money? Was it?
So overall, altogether, what was secured was like 22 million. 3 million of that was the tax credits. And then we received $1 million from the National Housing Trust Program, which we can talk about, and $1 million from the Affordable Housing Program. All of the rest was charitable. And from that charitable 19.2 million or 17 million from the just charitable, only about 600,000, 700,000 came from companies. All the rest came from individuals and foundations.
Okay, great. And I think this is actually a good question. Mary, can you do a short role play of what an initial call to an individual would sound like, please?
Yes, and I saw a chance how you said like you're still getting in the doors. Well, so these are so mostly these are donors we already know.
Yeah.
And so we would call, like Michelle, I'll just say she's the daughter on one of the foundations. And we just, said, Michelle, we are working on this project to do low-income housing for individuals. And we wanted to come and ask your, advice and guidance on what we're doing and to get your thoughts on what a community in Tulsa would look like. And so we go in there, we just show them what we think we're doing. Like we're going to build, 10 houses. We're going to have our admin building is going to be there. And so then they do say yes, because if you're asking them for their advice and guidance, I mean, it's like, I hate to say it this way, but you're stroking their ego and they come in, they let you in. And so, and then we ask them for advice and then we leave. And then either at the end of that meeting, we'll say, is it okay with you if we follow up with a meeting and, talk to you about what we might need as an investment? And they're not going to say no, because they just spent an hour with you telling you what they think, so that's for someone who we would know. And if someone we didn't know, I'm trying to think, there was a couple foundations we did not have a relationship with, but we were able to ask someone who had a relationship with that foundation to get us in the door. So they would send an email to like the foundation, say, Mary Ogle and Miranda from a New Leaf want to visit you about a project they're thinking about doing. Would you give them 30 minutes of your time? And again, the first meeting was mostly getting advice and guidance. And then the second and third meeting is when we would make the ask.
What advice do you have for small towns with not a lot of philanthropists?
Okay, Miranda, you gotta let me answer this, but then take over, Miranda. Everybody says there's no philanthropist, but it's not true. Unless you live maybe in like, I'm not even gonna say a town, because then that's rude of me to make an assumption. But there is so much money on the table, you guys. It's not true that there's no money wherever you live. There is money wherever you live. Get every single nonprofit's foundation, every single nonprofit in that whole state, and everyone on that annual report list, and start asking them. People give money, even in the worst of times, people give money. So I just don't buy it that your town doesn't have any money. The other thing is we took our current donors and then we put them through what's called wealth screening. And so you give your donor list to a company, and then they tell you how much assets those people have, who they currently donate to, and how much they donate to. So there were families who had been giving us $1,000 a year, and then we find out that they could actually give $100,000 a year. So I just don't. There's money. There's money. There's money.
How did you raise the initial funding, the seed money, prior to the capital campaign? I think he's referring to that $2.7 million that you guys got to acquire the property and launch the campaign.
Yeah, that was from our chairs, who were also our founders. In our case, because our founders were still alive, although the gentleman, Mr. Bernstein, passed away early on in the campaign. But it just made perfect sense for our founders to be able to chair our campaign. And so we actually did ask them for the 20% that is recommended. And they said, we'll give you 15. And then if we don't get there, maybe we'll have a discussion at the end. And we just didn't. We didn't need to go back to that, which, allowed for us to go back for future asks as well, and not wear out our welcome. But that's how the initial lead gift was secured.
Can you please talk about the admin overhead created by government funding, such as tax credit?
I mean, I saw that question. I have gray hair now. I didn't have it probably before the government funding. But again, the tax credit specifically, we received $3.2 million. The return on investment is 221%. So yes, there's some overhead. I have a stack of paper on my desk right now for the tax credits. But again, the return on investment is too strong for that. I do think the National Housing Trust Fund program and the Affordable Housing Program are better because they didn't require hardly anything. So again, anyone who's interested in tax credits, just shoot us an email and we'll talk about that on a different thing, because it's complicated. But those aren't things that I worry about. But I don't worry about the details. I just come up with ideas, and then my staff has to worry about the details. So my accountant would probably have different opinion about the tax credits than I would. But the other question I see in there about is that you're not very well known outside the community. And what are the best strategies? I tell you, we get a lot of media coverage. And I was taught how to do media when I lived in Philadelphia, and Ed Rendell, who was the governor of Pennsylvania at one time, he was the mayor of Philadelphia when I lived there. And no matter what the story was, he put himself in the middle of that story. And so we send out press releases maybe 2-3 times a week to all the media and all the radio about anything. And they pick up everything. They do. They are constantly looking for stories. People in Tulsa always say to me, boy, who do you have doing your media? You always get good media. We don't have anybody special doing media. We just send out the press releases 2-3 times a week, and they pick up the story. And so that's how we spread the message about the village before we even built it.
For everyone asking for Mary and Miranda's email addresses, I did type them into the chat box, so you can find them here. Trish is asking where you're getting donor lists. Actually, Mary did talk about that earlier. She went through the annual reports and went through all that to be able to look for the donor list. So if you missed it, please watch our video later. What is the size of your staff to be able to handle the admin issues?
Well, we have, Miranda, do you want to answer?
I'm not sure if that meant the fundraising component or what that piece is, but supporting the project, the only development staff that were supporting this project are Mary and myself. At the time, there was only 1 or 2 other people. We kind of grew our development team as we as we progressed. But those are the only other people on the development team. It's really just Mary and I working on the capital component. We have our CFO who helps with the forecasting, and she was really integral in the financial modeling and with the tax credit component. But these are positions that we would have in place regardless of this component. They were all in place before this. We didn't grow any admin specifically for this project. We added other positions specifically for this project, mostly in the direct support professional world, but no additional admin to support the project specifically, just the growth that came along with it.
I think for many of you that may not be familiar with the New Leaf, it's already an established organization with a very sound infrastructure that has very solid staff in place. So I think it's a little bit different for housing groups that come together to just create housing that needs to continue to build that. But I think for many existing organizations, it's actually kind of an easier extension or expansion to build housing because they already have an infrastructure in place. Were your residents of the village identified ahead of time, or did you have an application process after the village was completed? This was actually already discussed in the community spotlight event, but I think the second question is, did this help formulate sharing the message and the sustainability portion of the ask?
Yeah, I mean, we've asked our current clients first if they wanted to live at the village. So that's anyone we served already residentially or vocationally. We gave them the first option because they're already members of our family. But as soon as we mentioned the village publicly, we got a huge list of people. So one day I went, this is in the early stages, like 2017, 2018. Someone asked me to come and just talk to a couple people about a potential housing community. And I went to this, I thought I was meeting with like one or two people. And when I got there, it was standing room only. The whole church was filled with people who wanted it. And so as soon as we mentioned the village, we've got 150 people on a waiting list. So what that did help is because we could tell our donors, this is just phase one. We need phase two and phase three. So, but everyone in the community understood that low-income housing was needed for this population. And like, we didn't even have to sell that because everyone knew people who had family members living with them who needed housing. And we didn't ask anyone in exchange for moving in. They had to give some money or anything. That's
completely illegal. So
right,
you're not supposed to do that.
I'm glad we didn't do it then.
Yeah. I mean, when you receive donations, you have to send out a donation receipt that says that no services or whatever was provided in return. So no, that's completely illegal. You can get your not-for-profit status stripped, and you will lose your tax credits too. So you're not supposed to do that with the IRS or anybody as a not-for-profit organization. Yeah.
Actually, someone asked about, we do have a different structure. So we put the housing piece, the residential houses are under a separate LP. And I had to do that because of the tax credits. And then in 10 years, that will go away and then it'll come back into the full company. But it's consolidated financial statement. So it's all under us anyways, but just the resident housing is under an LP. The other question I see in there is, did press releases go to only local? Yes, we don't send them to national because they're not going to care. But we send to all of our local television, radio, newspaper. And I'm just telling you, if you're not sending out 2 or 3 press releases a week, send them out, they'll pick them up. And then if there's a national story, just make it about local topics. So for instance, like during a disaster like that happens on the other side of the country, we'll send out a press release here saying how much people with disabilities are impacted when a disaster strikes. It has nothing to do with anything, but they'll pick it up. Honest to God, they'll pick it up.
Do residents receive Medicaid waiver funding for support services? Yeah. Yeah, that was already covered in the previous community spotlight. So please go to our media page, and we had a wonderful program with Mary talking about the development of the village and what that looks like, and all the support services and the transition academy, all the great things that they were able to accomplish through raising $19.2 million. So that's a wonderful presentation. Everyone should go back and watch that.
You know, someone asked about families, and I'll just say one thing about the families is some of our top donors are family members. So again, send your donor list through who's your current donors through that wealth screening to find out which one of your families has capacity to give. And you'll be amazed. Our top donors are I think it's like 4 or 5 out of the top 10 donors are family members, which I think is very significant. There was, what is wealth screening? Wealth screening is just you hire a company. Miranda, you probably could say it a better way than me. Wealth screening.
Wealth screening. So I think you mentioned, Mary, when you said we have a list of people that donate $1,000, and then you send their name to a company and they tell you how much they have given in philanthropic efforts. So they're asking, like, what company did you use for that?
Yeah, so we used an organization called Donor Search. There are a bunch of different wealth screening tools out there. So I'm not saying that that's the best one or anything. That's just the particular one that we used. And it's a subscription that you use. Although there are sometimes you can use your local libraries to do some wealth screening, or you can pay other companies to just do like a one-time wealth screening. That's okay too. We're big enough now, we just have a subscription to it, but it's great because it'll show you, it's just for individuals, so it's not going to work for companies or foundation. We use GrantStation for foundations so that you can look up their 990s and see how much they have in assets and who they give to, and there's just a wealth of information on the 990s. But for individual prospecting, the one in particular that we use, it'll show other organizations or even political affiliations that they've given to, or political campaigns. It'll show you what their annual income is, what their house is worth. But the piece that we use, and you have to take it a little bit with a grain of salt, because there are a lot of other components that come into play, like, do they have a kid in college that they're paying for college for right now? You know, those things aren't going to show up on there. So, you know, you just have to, it's not a replacement for knowing your donor, but it'll show you like what their capacity to give is over a 5-year period. And then what the tool, the algorithm recommends that you ask them for based on their other giving and what their interests might be. But again, it is just one component, and it is never a replacement for building a relationship. It just is a launching point for you.
Yeah, I want to share some experiences the lessons that I've learned when I was trying to raise money, which was actually, Mary and Miranda, I think that you guys have a true talent in raising money, but that was the most difficult job that I had when I was trying to raise money for the previous project that I was working on. But that being said, one of the things that I learned from many foundations, they told us that they try not to work with startup organizations because they want to make sure that we can succeed. And therefore, they felt that many startups were too risky. And oftentimes they wanted to send us money towards the end instead of beginning. So for them, they wanted to see who was on the board and how many of the board members or the founders had skin in the game, which meant how much money have they contributed to your mission. And we will kind of complement that, or we will kind of fill in the blank, but we're not going to be the initiator of those, the project. So that was kind of my experience. I don't know if you guys have had that experience yourselves.
Yeah, they all of our board members do give, they give 100% of our board members give. But we didn't even have a board campaign. But for this campaign, we didn't have like the board give so much. What we did is 2 of our board members helped secure 2 of the $1 million gifts. So whenever someone asked us, well, is your board got skin in the game? Did they pay? We would say, well, we have 2 board members who helped us secure these 2 $1 million gifts. So that kind of took off. That's how we answered that question.
One more question that I had, this is different from, but just going back to the press release and media relations, did you guys use like any of these kind of PR Newswire, Business Wire type of platform, or did you just do it manually, like calling the media company and doing that yourself?
We just have an email. We just send out we just have like a group email that we blind copy all the media on it. And then they all get the same press release and we go from there. And then anytime a reporter comes out, we get that person's cell phone number and we add it to the list. So we just text and send those press releases out. And the press releases are like 2 paragraphs. So they're not anything great, but it doesn't take anything great. Honest to God, send out the press release, you'll get the media.
Andy was asking, did you have any donors who had children that might be clients? If so, how did you handle this? And
we do have donors who have their children. We do have clients families that have children who live here, but it just wasn't. It was separate, it wasn't part of the thing. And then one of the questions, how often per year would you have an in-person event for fundraising? As Miranda said, we only have 1 event a year and it raises, but now Miranda, I don't even know how much.
Yeah, about 360,000, but that's all annual support. There's not a separate component. That's capital.
I think Andy's asking about future clients. I think we talked about this. We can't make it a condition to accept people's money for their mission. So I think they accept donations. Thank you very much. And we really hope you get in the future. I think that's basically the right approach.
And in our thank you letter, in our IRS tax acknowledgement letter, it says nothing was given, nothing was received for this. So
yeah. So that's a tough one. I remember when I was working on the housing development, we had people said, I can write you a 7-figure check if you just guarantee the admission. And I said, I'm so sorry, we can't. Our hands are tied. So that's a really delicate situation. But if you would like to give because you believe in the mission, we would really appreciate it. But we cannot guarantee your child's admission. And I really, if an organization does that, I'm not really sure if I would trust the integrity of that organization.